sure where the blizzards are coming from. I think they're coming from a Minnesota Dairy Queen operator, although I'm not 100% sure of that.
All right.
Yes.
If you ended up with a Democratic Congress, how would you effectively get your proposals through those votes?
It's a really good question. The question for those in the back was, if you end up with a Democrat Congress, how do you get things done? Again, like in all these things, I've done exactly this. I never had a Republican legislature when I was governor. Never did. Had a Republican House for a little while, but everything I just described to you was done with a either entirely Democrat legislature or partly Democrat legislature. So again, I have direct experience with your question and the results. I learned a few things along the way, as we always do in these positions. One is, most politicians, not all of them, not these two fine legislators, are like running water downhill. They will go to the point of least resistance. So it really helps as the executive and the leader to put up some points of resistance and draw some lines in the sand. And in those dramatic moments, then people tend to have more courage and do things they sometimes wouldn't otherwise do. So I had the first government shutdown in 150 years. I set a record for vetoes to send the message to the legislature, these are the boundaries, don't go past them. I also used executive authority and took more spending out of the budget in my 8 years as governor than all the other 142 years were the governors combined, using something called unallotment. So I wish I could tell you that for these things, that it was all, wonderful, that they came over to the governor's residence, we had dinner, the Democrats were charmed by me, and they did whatever I asked them to do. It didn't quite go like that. A lot of it was just put the chin strap on and have at it, and there was big battles, and I won most of them. Now, there was also some things that because of good relations or bipartisan activity, we were able to get done cooperatively. But leaders have to have more than one gear. It's not all smash face all the time, and it's also not all, roses and chocolates all the time. You got to be able to have more than one gear as an effective leader, and I do. And again, it wasn't always easy, but we got it done. Ma'am.
My family's lived in Boone for 50 years, but we consider Duluth, Minnesota our home, and we want to welcome you.
Oh, you are so nice.
We
Thank
know
you.
what you've done in Minnesota. We have summer home up there, and we know when you closed up places, we can't get into the parks, and a few people are complaining, but it was a good thing, and we know you've done good work.
You're very kind to say. Thank you. Thank you. Well, again, I know it's hard for some people who aren't familiar with it, because Minnesota, again, for a conservative, is a pretty hostile environment. And during the recent shutdown of government, people could live without a lot of the services, but when they got to the point of the liquor stores running out of beer and not being able to renew their license, that's when a lot of people really got upset. So you know where the rubber hits the road in these deals. But thank you for your kind comments, and I love my state. It's a beautiful state. It's filled with really kind people, but politically, for much of its history, it's been pretty hard the other way. We were able to bend it back in a conservative, common sense direction.
Farmer labor was so strong there for so many years.
Yeah, it still is. It's a real battle, but we made good progress under difficult circumstances. Sir.
We hear the Democrats want to tax the rich, and yet, on the other hand, we have like 40-some% of the population not paying any taxes. How do we get some of that 40% paying taxes?
Yeah.
For example, earned income credit is a big one. That we have a lot of people that qualify for that anymore.
Right. Well, it's a great question, and for those who maybe over here couldn't hear, he was asking about the tax the rich of the Democrats' mantra, also the fact that a good percentage of the folks now don't pay federal income tax. A couple of observations. One is, Barack Obama and the Democrats believe in wealth redistribution. Their main goal, or one of their main goals, is to try to have wealth redistributed in a Robin Hood fashion. If you believe that, then vote for Obama. But that's exactly what history has proven is wrong. It's not what I believe. Our main objective for economic opportunity for people in this country is to get the economy to grow and to provide good paying jobs. That should be our main focus. And whether some percent of the country, is successful or not, that's interesting. We should applaud, by the way, success. We want people to invest and succeed and seek success. That's the American way. But we also, more importantly, want to make sure we have an economy that's growing and jobs are being provided. And if along the way, as part of that, some people are successful, terrific. Great. But he is not doing the things to get this economy moving. All of the folks in the country who are entrepreneurs and the folks who want to start and grow businesses and provide jobs, they all say the same thing. Get the government off my back. Make the load lighter, not heavier. Please do things to encourage me, not discourage me. Make the taxes less, not more. Make the regulations quicker and lighter, not heavier and slower. Please make the energy costs less expensive, not more expensive. The burdens have gotten too heavy. Barack Obama fundamentally misunderstands this issue. And I had a 10-year-old at a gathering like this. His name was Malin. And he came up because I had talked to him in the hallway and was amazed by his understanding of these issues. And I gave him the microphone, and I said, Malin, explain your view of the economy to these good people. He's 10 years old. He says, well, Governor, if you keep the taxes low, then people will have more money. And if people have more money, then they'll buy more things. And if they buy more things, then the businesses will be busier. And if the businesses are busier, then they'll hire more people. And if they hire more people, then those people will have more money. And then they will buy more things, and so on and so on. We shouldn't have to be at a point, and sadly we are in this country, where a 10-year-old has a better understanding of the entrepreneurial economy in this country than the President of the United States. And I'm telling it to you true. And on your last point, when you reach the point of in a democracy where you got more people riding in the wagon than you got pulling the wagon, you got a problem. And we are very near that point. And so we have to have more of our citizens productively engaged in the private economy, not the government economy and government programs. Now look, if people are disabled and have other life circumstances, we want a safety net for them. And with this economic situation we have now, it's hard for people to get jobs. But we do need another round of welfare reform so that in the future, as the economy recovers, the expectation needs to be you got to work or be looking for work or seeking work or training for work. But you know, unless you're disabled or have other life circumstances that are limiting, we can't just indefinitely pay you to be idle. And so we've got to have some expectations about individual responsibility and accountability and industriousness. And again, I'm not talking about people who are unemployed in this current recession. Unemployment compensation is a different issue, different program. I'm talking about welfare and social services more broadly going forward for the country. We're going to need another round of welfare reform. Sir, all the way, well, sir, you had your hand up, and we'll go back further. We'll try to move it around here. Go ahead.
I'm a second-year law student, and
sorry to hear that.
I just law, and I was surprised at the profound influence that the judiciary has on the Constitution. So I was just curious if you're originalist, or if you view the Constitution some other way. And by the way, my roommate is from Minnesota, and he's a progressive, and he doesn't like you. That's a pretty good endorsement.
Time to get in line. Look, I believe the Constitution and the law should be interpreted and applied as written and as intended. And I really get annoyed and frustrated and angry when judges step into the mix and say, because the law may not be 100% clear, they're going to insert their personal views or political views into the situation. If a judge has that challenge, he or she should have the humility and the restraint to step back and say, it's not my job to guess or interpret or insert my personal views into this deal. If there's ambiguity or lack of clarity, send it back to the legislature and the governor or the Congress and the president to clarify it if they choose to. And so that's why I was very, very engaged and focused on appointing people to the Minnesota Supreme Court who were strict constructionists, who would apply the law as written and originally intended, and who would have the humility and the restraint to not insert their own personal political views into the equation. And those justices, by the way, were heralded across the country as some of the best, maybe the best judicial appointments of any in the country. One of my favorites, by the way, is I appointed a guy who was one of the leaders of the Federalist Society, Clarence Thomas, his former law clerk. And when the legal glitterati in Minnesota had assembled, most of whom don't share my political views, were there to see the new justices sworn in. Clarence Thomas showed up in a surprise moment to swear in his former law clerk, and it was fun to see the legal community's jaws drop a little bit. It was one of my favorite memories from my time as governor. Okay, sir, you go ahead.
Yeah. With everything that's happened in the United States in the past few months, I can't help but believe that Iran and North Korea are kind of happy about all the distractions, because we've kind of focused on the economy, which is good, but unlike the president right now, will you be able to multitask?
If you're going to be president of the United States, you got to be able to do more than one thing at a time. I will say his focus in his first year and a half as president was really off. I mean, we got a country that is sinking, an economy that's drowning, his federal spending that's out of control, and he spends a year and a half promoting a unconstitutional, misguided piece of healthcare reform that is awful. And then he spends time doing things like trying to figure out how to close Guantanamo so he can bring suspected terrorists back to American soil. He should have been working on the economy more fully. But as to your question, sir, in the Middle East, the first order of business of our federal government is to make sure that this nation is secure, that our people are safe, and that our security interests are advanced and protected here and around the world. If you're interested in the fuller version of this, I gave the most detailed speech on foreign policy and security by far of any candidate in the race. It's available at timpawlenty.com. It was to the Council on Foreign Relations in New York, and it goes through in great detail the Middle Eastern situation. But the highlights are these. One, stand by our friends. And now we have a president who purposely and repeatedly sticks his thumb in the eye of Israel, has undermined not only our friendship with them, but their security position and ours. We should stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel. They're one of our best friends in the world. Two is, for the remaining countries in the Middle East, each one's different, of course, and they deserve individual attention, but let me, for purposes of time, put them in three broad groups. One is the countries that have already gone through revolution, namely Tunisia, Morocco, sort of, Egypt. For those, we should do everything we can to try to get them aligned in the future towards democracy and freedom, not the Muslim Brotherhood. There's a second group of Middle Eastern countries that have monarchies, absolute monarchies. I think you can see the handwriting on the wall. We're not going to have absolute monarchies. I don't think their people's going to tolerate that much longer. So I think we'd be well served and well advised to work with those monarchies to encourage them to move towards shared power models with their citizens. And then we've got a few countries that are outright hostile to us and our friends. And they need to be dealt with more directly, I should say more hostile. They need to be dealt with more directly and firmly. That would include Iran, that would include Syria, and some others. Barack Obama's policy of engagement, where he thinks he's going to sweet-talk the mullahs into liking him, it hasn't worked. In fact, one recent poll showed that the United States is less popular now in the Middle East than they were when George Bush was president. So all of his apologizing, which I thought was abysmal, all of his saying, suggesting that we're not exceptional, that we're just one of equals in the world. No, we're not, Mr. President. We're not the same as Portugal. We're not the same as Argentina in terms of our role in the world. And as to Iran, we need to do everything we plausibly can to delay and defer and to stop their efforts and intentions to get a nuclear weapon. Let's see, sir, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think the last 2 weeks have really illustrated how broken the system is. I want to ask you this question, how this happened. The House passed a bill, cap and balance.
Right.
Bipartisan. Based on polls, it was supported by 66, 67% of the public. How could a bill like that pass, go to the Senate, and those people who we sent to Washington say, we're not even going to talk about it? And had they talked about it, had they passed that, we wouldn't have the problems we're dealing with this week with being downgraded, et cetera. How can the system work that way?
Well, it's really frustrating. I was a strong supporter and an early supporter of cut, cap, and balance as well. And by the way, I don't believe anymore that we can just send Washington, D.C., people to Washington, D.C. and expect that they're going to, in Congress, do the right thing when it comes to spending. I think we are at the point where we, the people, need to take back our government and put some guardrails and some limits on them as to what they can do. And that's why I think one of the best things we can do for our country is to pass a constitutional amendment to force them to balance the budget. Now, you're exactly right. I think if the people got that question, they would strongly support it. The House supported it, and then it went to the Senate. And obviously there's a disconnect between the folks there and how the people feel. And that's unfortunate. But now we have a chance to readjust. And if you look at where those Senate seats are open next time, they're highly favorable to Republicans. And so it's likely, and we're hopeful, that we'll keep the House. If you look at where those Senate vacancies are going to occur, it looks very favorable for Republicans. So the only thing standing between what we believe getting done and not will be who's in the White House. And so that's why these issues and your presence here today is so important and so appreciated. But I will guarantee you, sir, I took spending in Minnesota, like I said, they had 21% spending every 2 years average for 40 years before I became governor. During my time as governor, it was a little over 1% per year, and I cut spending for the first time in real terms in state history in my last 2 years in office. It was the best change in the spending trajectory, and the call was always by the Democrats, well, let's raise taxes. Why? Because they want to get back to the days of 21% spending increase every 2 years. I don't know about you, but nobody's paycheck that I know is going up 21%, if they even have a job, if they even have a raise. And so this idea that we got to raise taxes so we can get back to the good old days is baloney. We have to, when people talk about a balanced solution, you have to look at the imbalance of how we got into the hole in the first place. And if you look at tax revenues, the collections, they've kept up with the private economy. The thing that's gone off the charts is the government spending. And so when people come to you and say, well, what about a balanced solution? Well, say, great, let's take a step back and look then at what balance means. What balance are you talking about? Because the thing that was out of balance and what remains out of balance isn't our taxes. In fact, we're still overtaxed. It's our spending. And that's why it's so important that we get that under control. Barack Obama refuses to address this. They're spending $40,000 a second they don't have. If you're here for an hour, that's $144 million in 1 hour that they will spend that they do not have. Every dollar they spend, 40 cents of it they don't have. Like I said, it's a Ponzi scheme. And if they were in the private sector, they'd be indicted. They'd be indicted. It's that bad. And so we have to stop this. And it starts with getting a president who's going to be committed to it with the record of results. So I'll just close by, again, asking you to come. I'm getting a hook here, but please come to Ames and help our campaign. We'd really appreciate it. I won't let you down as president. And again, I'm not just giving you these words that you've heard so many other times. You can look at the results. I got it done. I'll do the same thing on behalf of this country as president. Thank you for coming out today.